All right, well, welcome back to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex.
And Eva.
And this episode, we're going to do part 2 of Rex's story, my story. So take a listen. And people will sometimes have a relapse. And so that's how I've chosen to talk about part 3 of my life. There was nothing that was overly stressful other than I went to a secular college. Eva, you know this part of the story. Yep. I've been very open with you about this part. I had a great college career, joined a fraternity. It was a super experience, and I'm not promoting fraternities one way or the other. All I can tell you is what happened to me. It was a great experience. I still stay in touch with a lot of my fraternity brothers to this day. We are brothers. We grew up together. We learned life together. But one of the negatives about going to a secular college is there are parties. I'm like, hey, here's the dumbest idea ever, Eva. Let's take our 18-year-old sons and daughters and let's send them away unsupervised to a college campus. Sometimes it's 100 miles away. Sometimes it's 500, 1,000, 2,000. But let's take our 18-year-old sons and daughters and send them off totally unsupervised, and let's see what happens. I've said that before.
Straight into adulthood.
Straight into adulthood.
No, there's no transition period. Like as a kid, you get like a bunch of years to go from like learning how to walk to run, and then it's just like, oh, you're done with high school. Have fun.
Yeah, right. And
Call us if you need us.
Yeah, and the point with that is sometimes when we're thrown in those adult type situations, we start doing adult type things before we're really adults. And you've heard me say this before. Let's not do married things before we're married. And so that unfortunately happens on a college campus sometimes. And for 2 years, I did a great job of adhering to the family values that I was raised with. But then at the end of the second year, I kept looking at the keg. I kept looking at all the pretty sorority girls. And I thought, you know what? That looks like a very, very fun option. And so I kind of jumped in head first on that lifestyle. And again, I wasn't a bad guy. I was very moral. I was very ethical. But I was doing what I feel like the culture at that time expected, which was, hey, just be a college Joe Frat guy and, enjoy the party scene. It's not, and here's the 2 lies. If our audience has not figured out yet, we are Christians. We subscribe to the Bible. But there's 2 lies that the devil will tell you. Number 1 is, hey, everybody's doing it. And number 2 is it's not hurting anyone. Well, there's a degree of truth to both of those statements. I looked around and it appeared that everyone was doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
loves to speak in part truth.
In partial truth. And that's another lesson that Paul taught me. The devil loves to tell partial truth. He will tell you things that are true, but they're not the total truth. And so anyway, I had to learn the hard way, but wasn't a bad guy, very ethical, very moral, but I was the last one at the keg. And as long as the girls were hanging around, I was hanging around. And some of our audience may even go, hey, what's wrong with that? Well, we were doing married things before we were married, and we were doing adult things before we had truly grown up and become adults. And I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Okay. You and I have talked in more detail about that. We'll talk about it in more detail as father and daughter in days to come. Yeah. But that's my story. And here's another piece of that part in the relapse. Again, we're in section 3. In the relapse, remember this, I'm doing everything that I think makes me successful. I was the student body president. I was president of the largest fraternity on campus, one of the largest chapters in the nation.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know you were president of any of that stuff.
Well, I don't talk about that. That's kind of past history, but it's cool that you know that.
See, you learn something new every time you listen.
Yep. So. And that's why we have these conversations generation to generation. I was also the mascot for, at that time, it was Arkansas State University Indians. Yeah, she's laughing over here hysterically. You did not know that.
I didn't know.
Okay. You've never seen a picture of me in Native American attire. We did it as authentically as possible to include the replication of the war dances that we did. We wanted to honor that heritage and that culture. It was not,
Another thing culture has turned on is the simple honoring of it has now become appropriation, and it's wrong. And so that's another interesting topic is how we view things, because you would never see that in today's culture, really.
Yeah.
I think it's just cool. It's cool to hear these stories.
Yeah. And it was a big part of who I was. And so, yeah, university mascot. And what you just brought up, that may be another episode itself in how we deal with things culturally today, honoring people without dishonoring different aspects of their heritage and their culture. But anyway, part of my story, university mascot, president of the largest fraternity on campus, one of the largest chapters in the nation, president of the student body, and just had an opportunity to step into a lot of leadership roles. College gave me the opportunity to kind of spread my wings a little bit and stretch out. And that's when I was selected as the top member of my fraternity to go to Washington, D.C. and have lunch with Ronald Reagan when he was a president, because Ronald Reagan was a member of my fraternity. And so that you didn't know that, okay? They wanted to honor him in a variety of different ways. And so one of the ways they chose to do that was to pick the top undergraduate that year and call it the Ronald Reagan Leadership Award. So you are looking at the first ever Ronald Reagan Leadership Award winner from Tau Kappa Epsilon. And
Do they still give that out?
As far as I know, they do. They still do.
It's a cool way to honor his legacy.
It's a very cool way. And it was neat. You've seen the picture of me and him together.
Office.
It's in my office. And so just a neat story. But here's how I want to end section 3. I was doing everything that I felt like the world expected of me and the culture expected of me. Achieve, succeed, be driven, just do all the right things, get some awards on the wall, kind of become known for a guy that gets it done. And please hear me. There's nothing wrong with achievement. There's nothing wrong with success. But to use a term we often hear, don't lean your ladder on the wrong wall and then get to the top of the ladder and find out you had it up against the wrong wall. Yeah. Well, that's what your dad found out. You know, I felt good. Everything looked good. Everything sounded good. I'm on top of the world. I'm 23 years old, and I am in Washington, D.C. with the President of the United States. Man, how can it get any better? But the truth is, I knew I was not living a life fully committed to the values that Ma and Pa had raised me with. And I was making a few compromises in my life. I think that's the best way to put that. I was just making a few compromises, but nonetheless, I felt I was very successful in the eyes of the world and culture. And then that set me up for stage 4, which was the resurrection. Okay, before I go to that, any questions?
I think I said most of, but it was super funny. Again, another story. Don't have a question. I'm a small group leader for girls, and we were just talking about this not being a part of culture, and it was the example of like a caterpillar and how the caterpillar goes apart, part of life and everything, but it's very short, and they can be very destructive. You know, they can eat the leaves they can eat the leaves and be very destructive, and then they go into a cocoon and they get rebirthed as a butterfly, but each butterfly is different, and so they're no longer like the world, which obviously resembles Jesus's like your redemption story. But I think that's a really cool thing is like you were like, I was doing everything that seemed right, but it was actually really destructive. So
excuse me. Yeah. That's
sorry, that's my comment, my 2 cents.
Okay. Well, that's a perfect example. So let's go to what happened. Well, how you've been through this trauma, you've been through some healing and some recovery. You had a little bit of a relapse. You were successful based on what culture laid out. But then you had a true resurrection. What happened with that? Well, that goes into the parachute story. And we're not going to go into all of the details of that. I posted that on Facebook years ago, and it's going to be in the book. There's a lot of technical details, but here's what people need to know for the episode today. Jumped out of an airplane and the parachute.
The entire part of why you're jumping out of an airplane. You haven't told anybody that you were in the Army. You skipped that whole part. Like you went straight from college to jumping out of an airplane.
That is
not skydiving.
That is a great point, Eva. I went straight from college to jumping out of an airplane. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. I joined the Army right out of college, and so this was the 10th year. I actually went through Army ROTC, got a commission as a second lieutenant, and so in the 10th year, I was on what the Army calls jump status, and you have to jump once a quarter to maintain your qualification, and they pay you a little bit extra money for those folks that are crazy enough to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And so I was on jump status at Fort Polk, Louisiana. It's called Fort Jones today. I think it's Fort Jones. Yeah. But Fort Polk back in those days. Yeah, Mom and I had been married.
I'm trying to figure out the timeline.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Mom and I had been married 3 years at this point. This happened in 1995. We got married in 92, so we had been married for 3 years. So, yeah, think about that. Yeah. A young bride. We were still, Mom was in her late 20s. I was in my early 30s when this happened.
Piecing a timeline together.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And matter of fact, we had our first dog. Dallas was with us, and we had Austin 1 at the time.
That's a good story.
That's a great story. We name all of our dogs after cities in Texas. So we have had Dallas, Austin 1, Austin 2, Jasper. And I think that's when we started going to a few different names.
Colonel and Archie.
Colonel, Archie.
And then when they let me start naming them, we had Disney and Peaches.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts in South Carolina. And then we have Dakota.
We
went back to the States, but.
Yeah. So we've got some different methodology for naming our dogs. So anyway, back to the jumping out of airplane. No, you're good. Jumping out of airplanes. So jump status, Fort Polk, January 1995. It was extremely cold that night. It was extremely dark that night. Couldn't see anything. Zero illumination. Came out of the aircraft and nothing. I thought I had a total malfunction. And I was actually caught on top of another jumper chute. And we kind of figured this out as we were rapidly descending. And again, to make a long story short, without getting into the technical details, we separated about 200 feet off of the ground. And then I did what's called a burn-in. You just fell the rest of the 200 feet. And I came to an abrupt and abrasive halt, and it was painful. And the medics got to me as quick as they could. And when they started slapping me around, bringing me to, because obviously it knocked me out, totally unconscious. There's a whole story with that. Man, I was in la la land. Thought I was actually a jumper had died the year before. He was 19 years old, and he had died on the drop zone in Arkansas. And I was thinking about him on the way down. I thought they're going to find you just like they did that young kid at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. And so when the medics got to me, they said, "Where are you?" When they got me back conscious, they said, "Hey, they're trying to figure out how lucid I am." And so they're asking really simple questions. "Hey, where are you?" I said, "Fort Chaffee." Well, that's where my mind was when I hit the ground. And they're like, "No, man." And they're like, "No, think." And of course, I'm mad because they're slapping me even more, trying to get me to snap out of it. And I'm like, my mind is totally at Fort Chaffee. And I said, "Fort Chaffee." Slap me again. And I thought, man, if I get up off this ground, I'm going to bust you in your nose. But then it started dawning on me, no, you're at Fort Polk. And so my mind started clearing. And we're almost done with this segment, but I think these are some important details for our listeners to hear. I I started coming to and really began to get some clarity, realized where I was, realized how far I had fallen, didn't know the extent of exactly what happened, how it transpired, but I'm like, man, you just hit the ground extremely hard at a rapid velocity, and you've probably busted every organ in your body. And you're filling up with blood right now. You've got busted lungs. You've got a busted spleen. There's no telling what else is broken.
There's something bleeding.
Oh yeah, and there's something bleeding in me. So all that to say, I thought, man, I was actually impressed with myself that I lived and survived the impact. I thought, man, you're a stud. You survived that impact. That's pretty impressive. But very quickly, I also realized, yeah, but you survived the impact, but you're busted, you're broken, you're bleeding, and you're going to bleed to death right here on the drop zone, and you're going to die in the next 60 to 90 seconds. Now, not to get into biblical doctrine and theology, different people have different takes on this, but in that moment, I really felt like, because this is just me, forget Bible doctrine, forget theology, forget all of that. I'm just telling you how I felt in that moment. I felt like I had rejected everything my mom and dad had taught me about what is good, what is true, what is holy. Holy is a word, by the way. And I just felt like I had rejected that and turned my back on it. And here was the thought, whether it's true or not, here was the thought. I said to myself, you have rejected everything you were taught, all those values that we've been talking about, even though I was moral, I was ethical, I was a great guy. Just ask somebody. They would tell you to this day, hey, I don't even know what he's talking about. He was a great guy. He was a good guy. But I did not know Jesus Christ. And I felt like you turned your back on the truth and you're going to hell tonight. Again, whether I would have, that's not the question. I'm telling you how I felt. Yeah. And it was miserable. I wouldn't wish that feeling on my worst enemy. And I don't really have any worst enemies, by the way. No. I love my enemies. Jesus said that, right? Yeah. Love your enemies. And so I wouldn't wish it on anybody, Eva. It was a miserable, dejected, depressing feeling. And to kind of close the story out, in the hospital I had an experience, and this is my testimony. I was so mad at God, and I just hit my fist in the bed, and I said, what do you want from me? Through gritted teeth. Can you imagine?
No,
Can you imagine talking out? Yeah, I don't think you've ever seen me mad. I was so mad at God.
I've seen you frustrated. I don't think I've seen you mad.
Okay. I was mad. I was angry. And the truth is, I was probably angry at myself. But I took it out on God. How many people do that today? We're frustrated, we're angry, we're bitter, and we take it out on the people closest to us. And in that case, I took it out on God. And through gritted teeth, I said, what do you want from me? Well, 7 words changed my life. Still small voice. I can hear it just like you and I are sitting here talking today. And the answer to the question was, you, that's all. I just want you. And in that moment, I had a true experience with Jesus Christ, because I was like, he loves me. He's for me. I don't have to keep the 10 Commandments perfectly. It'd be nice if I could, but I don't have to be perfect. Yeah. I don't have to be dad. And that was a big part of my story that I haven't talked about. We'll do that on another episode. But really part of the issue is my adopted dad was so big in my life, and I thought he was so perfect and he got everything right. I thought I had to be him. And I looked to him as my role model, and he was. But the truth is, it was God in him that I saw. Yeah. And in that moment when God spoke to me, I realized, oh my goodness, you've been looking at the wrong thing. God loves you. He's for you. He sent his son to die for you, and he just wants a relationship with you. You don't have to check off a bunch of marks. You don't have to clean yourself up. You don't have to be whatever it is you thought that your dad was, and you don't have to meet those standards.
That comes after you know him.
There's a book that just came out, and it's specifically written for millennials, but it's called Never Enough. I just ordered it. It came in this week. I'm really looking forward to reading that, but it got my attention because I think it not only applies to millennials, it applies to all of us. We sometimes have this feeling, I'm just not enough. And so in that hospital room, Eva, that's kind of how I had felt. I had all the success, been to the White House, was doing great in my military career, but yet there was this little piece of me that thought, I'm just not enough. And then in that moment when God answered and I heard his still small voice, I thought, you are enough because he made you, he designed you, he loves you, he's for you, and you've been looking at this all wrong. And that's part of perspective, it's part of proper context, and it's part of continuing to be able to talk, not only to each other, but to God. And again, we're Christians, so we're going to get into that more in different episodes. But that's kind of the story, part 1, 2, 3, 4. Any questions that you, anything that we want to close out with?
I don't know. Like, how has that affected the next 30 years of your life? Because I mean, it's been what, 29 years since your parachute accident? Because we're 2024. So how has that affected, your construction? How long were you in the Army? And what are you doing now? Like, essentially, like, close out the story. Tell them where you are in 2024.
Okay. Well, that's great. To answer your question, it impacted everything. It impacted the way I see the world, impacted the way I see other people. It impacted the way I see myself because again, I felt like I didn't measure up and all of a sudden I have this experience. I'm like, whoa, you're using the wrong measuring stick. You just have some wrong viewpoints and you have some wrong viewpoints about God. I thought God was kind of out to get me and that, I just never could measure up to him. Not only not measuring up to my earthly dad, I'm like, man, I can't even measure up to God. And by the way, that's another lie the devil told me as a college student. He's like, I felt called to ministry at 8. My aunt laid her hands on my head and anointed me and prayed a prayer of blessing. I knew I was called to the ministry, but the devil told me another lie. And he pointed at my earthly dad, my adopted dad, and he said, you can't be a pastor. That's a pastor. Matter of fact, that's what a Christian is. You can't be that.
It's whole chapters and books of the Bible and all that. My audio just cut out.
Yeah, my dad could recite verse upon verse upon verse of the Bible. And the devil used that against me because I thought, yeah, man, I can't do that. I can't roll with 20, 30, 40 verses. And Dad could do it out of almost any book in the Bible. So the devil used that to intimidate me, but to also set a false standard to where I, in my own self, said I'm not enough. I don't measure up. So to answer your question again, how did that parachute accident impact my life? When I came out of the hospital, I was a totally different person because I understood the grace of God, the mercy of God, the love of God, truly for the first time. I had a lot of head knowledge of the Bible. I knew all 66 books. Dad had taught me the scriptures. And I had a relationship with Jesus to a degree. I accepted Christ as a young child, but I was not growing. Here's the key point. I was not growing in the relationship, and I was not sure that I had ever heard his voice. But in that hospital, I heard his voice, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt, this is a tangible, real God that loves me, that cares for me, that has a plan for my life, and it changed everything about my life, especially in the manner in which I deal with people. I have a lot of grace and patience for people today.
You do.
Okay. Well, thank you.
It's everywhere. I mean, like compared to me and Mama, you're like, you just calm, except when things mess up sometimes and you're just like, oh, and you just keep going.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And that's called the fruit of the Spirit. We'll get into that maybe one of these episodes, but love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are all part of the deal. And, but once you have an encounter with a risen Savior, it'll change the way you view, again, life, the world, yourself, and the people around you. And it's given me a lot of patience toward people. Because here's the deal, Eva. The 4 pieces that I've chosen to break my story into, let me go over them again. trauma and tragedy, then healing and recovery, then a relapse, and then a resurrection. Most people can identify with that in some shape, form, or fashion. And when you know that you have been resurrected, I'm going to be resurrected to eternity one of these days, but I got resurrected in this life. And it's been amazing these past 29 years. And hey, you're the beneficiary of that.
Yes.
Because I do have a lot of patience with you, do I not?
Oh, yeah, I need it. I can be a handful, like not like in a rebellious sense, more just like I'm all over the place. Sometimes my actions are all over the place and it doesn't make sense to some people. So you have a lot of patience with that and understanding.
Well,
I do things differently sometimes.
You are. You're very creative. You think differently than I do. You see the world differently. And God taught me through that, Eva. I want you to hear this. I thought I was going to have a son. I thought he was going to be the athletic type. God has a sense of humor, and I get this little bouncy girl that's got all this creative energy. And you even said it yourself today. Hey, the day that I quit being a little bit weird is the day I'm going to worry about myself because Eva, you
I'd
are
rather be weird than boring.
Yeah, you are not boring by any sense of the imagination or stretch of the imagination. But you have helped me in so many ways to realize there's more than one way to solve a problem. You and I, we have a totally different approach to solving problems, the way that we see the elements of the problems, the way that we break it down. But I saw that early in you that you were able to come up with an answer. And I remember looking at you thinking, that is not the way that I would have done that. But she still came up with the correct answer. And I have loved that about you, is that you bring a different perspective. You've helped me realize I'm a C personality, by the way. The C is the analytical type. I'm always right. Just ask me. I'll be glad to tell you. And you helped me to realize, hey, there's more than one solution to a problem.
Yeah, I'm tied between S and I, so I don't actually remember what that means. I probably should retake it, but no, I think that I learned a lot. I've learned how to like compartmentalize and like see things more analytically. But I may not do it the most efficient way, but I'll get it done, unless I don't have motivation for it, and then it kind of ends up half done. Hotel Alpha, you'll learn about that later.
Yes, you will.
Yeah, but I've learned a lot. Like your story, I mean, so much happened before I was born, and I think that plays a big part in how you've parented me. And so I may not make the same choices and mistakes you did because of what you've taught me. But I also think that I can identify not same situations, but the same issues in different situations because of your stories like this. Like I may not find myself, I'm going to a Bible college. I may not find myself in a sorority experiencing the same kind of, parties, but I can also see, oh, I shouldn't be friends with that person. I can tell that their life will not lead me in the right way, or it's going to influence me negatively. And so your lessons, even though I don't leave home often, they still are good lessons that I can use, and they're just stories to you. They're your life. And for me, they're some of the greatest lessons I'll ever learn.
That's so awesome. And that blesses my heart. And what we're talking about is principles. Principles remain the same. There can be procedures and methodologies, different ways to approach a problem, just like we've talked about. But principles and values, those remain consistent and constant. And that's one of the things that your mother and I have tried to teach you is those principles that you're going to build your life on.
Yep.
And they're going to help you navigate some of those situations that, as you said, they're not going to be the same as what I went through even 40 years ago, but you're going to recognize it. Oh, the parameters, the elements are a little bit different, but this is the same type of situation that Dad was in, and here's the principle. So anyway, I think that's going to serve you well.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed hanging out with you for this episode.
Yep.
And as we always are going to end with, let's always remain able to talk from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcast so you never miss an episode. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at G2G_podcast and on Facebook at Generation to Generation.